Good day, class. Let's talk about the embryology of second week to fourth week of development. Um, Second to fourth week are very, very important in embryology. They are critically transformative. Think of this period as building a house in Nigeria. Week two is like laying the foundation. That's the bilaminar disc and implantation. Week three is like putting up pillars, that's gastrulation and jam layers. Week four is like starting the walls and roof, and that's like folding and organogenesis. Now, if you skip a step, trouble happens. Trouble arises, just like a poorly built house collapses. So, clinically, this period explains early pregnancy loss, congenital malformation, and the origin of the placenta and the extra embryonic structures. Okay, so they are very, very important. Week two, for example, like I said, is for bilaminar jam disc and implantation completion. The timeline is between day 8 to 14, and the key events here are implantation is completed, the trophoblast differentiate into cytotrophoblast, that's the inner proliferative layer, and syncytiotrophoblast, that's the outer invasive layer. Then there's bilaminar discs that forms. Epiblast becomes the embryoblast, while the hypoblast become the extra embryonic structures. Now, amniotic cavity, forms within the epiblast, and this is lined by the amnioblast. So the yolk sac, you know, yolk sac formation then provides, you know, um, uh, 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 early nutrients before the placenta then develops. Okay. Then also there's extraembryonic mesoderm which surrounds the yolk sac and amniotic cavity, splitting it into somatic and then the splanchnic layers. There's also the chorionic cavity development, which allow the embryo growth. Okay, so for a HCG detection, human chronic gonadotropin, um, it's a hormone for pregnancy detection. Imagine someone uh, in the market trying to test for pregnancy. When the test turns positive, the person shouts, I'm expecting, you know, that is Syncytiotrophoblast producing the HCG. Without it, there's no celebration. So the Syncytiotrophoblast produces HCG, human chorionic gonadotropin, which is indicative of a pregnancy. So for the yolk sac, think of it as, uh, uh, you know, think of it as our mother's, you know, food pot, feeding the early embryo until the placenta is actually ready. Now for week three is for gastrulation and trilaminar disc. The timeline here is just 15 to 21 days, and the key events in the in day 15 to 21 is the primitive streak appears on the epiblast at the caudal end, making the start of the gastrulation and defining the craniocaudal axis. Then jam layers form, through migration, you know, the primitive streak, of course. Then we have the ectoderm, which of course is the remaining epiblast, forming the skin and the central nervous system. The mesoderm migrates between the epiblast and hypoblast, which of course give rise to the muscles, the skeleton, the circulatory system. Then we have the endoderm. The endoderm here replaces the hypoblast, which of course, forms the gut and the internal organs. Then we have the notochord. The notochord forms from the mesodermal, cells, which of course induces neural plate to be formed. Then, of course, we have the placental villi, which form, and then, of course, uh, is in sync with the maternal blood. Then, extra embryonic mesoderm, of course, forms the connecting stalk, which, of course, forms the future umbilical cord. So everybody must get in line correctly, because if people at this point, just like people, being in the market, they must get in line correctly. And if if people like cells, for example, get out of order, then chaos is bound to happen. Just like misaligned jam layers can, of course, cause congenital defects such as sacrococcygeal teratoma or caudal dysgenesis. Now, for week 4, what happens in week 4 is embryonic folding and early organogenesis, and the timeline is day 22 to day 28. There are key events, just like in week 2 and week 3. The key event in a week 4 is embryonic folding, of course. And, longitudinal, that's the cephalocaudal folding, forms the head and the tail folds. Then we have the transverse folding, that's the lateral transverse folding, which converts the flat disc into a cylindrical embryo. Then we have the primitive, gut, that forms the yolk sac, which of course is incorporated. And then we have neurulation. Neurulation here, the neural plate, you know, lead to neural groove, and of course forms the neural tube. Then also there is cranial neuropore, which closes at I think day 25. And then we have caudal neuropore, which closes at day 27, if I can remember. Failure of this failure inclusion definitely lead to neural tube defect, that's anencephaly and spinal bifida. Here also somites, you know, formed from paraxial mesoderm, which give rise to vertebrae, skeletal muscles, and the dermis. Then also heart tube. The primitive heart tube begins beating around the 22nd to 23rd. I'm going to make a video on development of the cardiovascular system in the embryo. Okay. Then another key event here is intraembryonic column, which forms body cavities like the pericardial, the pleural, and the peritoneal cavity. Then we also have the primitive gut, that's the endoderm, which forms gut connected to yolk sac. Okay, so these are very, very important. Now, the key concepts here is that the bilaminar jaundice give rise to leads to trilaminar jaundice, and of course organogenesis, and more like building a house, like I said, to foundation, to pillar, to walls. And once you skip any step, there's a problem. I'll also mention the production of HCG, that human chronic gonadotropin, for positive results in Syncytiotrophoblast activity. Okay, and I also mentioned that if there's misalignment, okay, in in the layers, jam layers, there's bound to be chaos. Then, lastly, I mentioned the embryonic folding, so which is also very important. Now, the clinical relevance of this is found, like I've mentioned them, you know, uh, uh, in passing, like the neural tube defect, that's the spinal bifida, uh, and anencephaly. We also have omalucell, okay, omphalocell. I don't, I, omphalocell, yeah, omphalocell. That's the failure of lateral folding. Once there's failure of, we have craniocephalic folding, and then we have lateral folding. So once there's failure of lateral folding, we have omphalocell. Okay. Then we also have congenital heart defects. Okay, early tube looping error. So Maybe in my next video, I'm going to be doing a video. I'm going to be talking about, sorry, about the congenital anomaly in cardiovascular system development. Okay, there can also be placenta problems, of course, which will definitely lead to early pregnancy loss. So remember, week 2 to 7 are actually the blueprint phase of a pregnancy, and once there's a misstep, then definitely there could be a lifelong consequences that one might not be able to recover from. So this is talking about week 2 to week 4. Have a nice day ahead.